My name is Leung. I'm a senior director of product management for Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. And thanks so much for joining us today. I see all new faces except for Enrico, who I've known for many years at this point. We're going to do a lot of different things today. We're going to have 5 different parts. I'm going to do an overview of what we have, because I think certainly we talk about cloud a lot, and we have a lot of clouds, so I want to clear some of that stuff up. And we're going to intersperse it with live demos to show you the technology, to show you actual use cases and what the technology is about. And then we're going to have a final section, which is a pre-announcement of some really cool stuff that is coming later this year. All right, so I'm going to start with an overview, and again, as quickly as possible, get into actual case studies, and again, how this technology is used. And feel free to ask questions throughout. So the ever-present safe harbor statement. The agenda. Okay, so just to ground folks on what we do. So I've been at Oracle for 2 years, okay? And pretty much everybody involved with the Oracle Cloud Infrastructure team has been here for less than that, right? So it's a pretty different set of people. There's a lot of people from other cloud providers. I've come from 2 startups myself prior to this. I was with a big company before, EMC. But again, I think there is a very different thing going on with the cloud infrastructure team and the cloud in general in trying to bring in people that, you know, have built things before, right? Have been involved in the cloud before, have built applications on top of the cloud, have been cloud consumers, right, on the other end. So you got a real nice mix of people with a lot of experience, some very, very good architects, as well as, you know, people that have been end users and in the market for quite a while. But we're combining that heritage with the fact that we do have a lot of customers where we've been critically involved in their applications and in their businesses for decades at this point, right? And when you talk to some of these customers, it's pretty cool. There's many customers that are in the Global 2000 or Fortune 500 you may have never heard of, but they make industrial products, right? They make things like lenses. They make sensors, all kinds of instrumentation throughout. And we're involved in all these businesses, typically with their business applications or some aspect of their database, right? So our goal overall is to help these businesses continue to prosper. And as they start to evolve into the next business or the next scale or the next market, to help them succeed. So it all comes back to that data, right? So I've heard various estimates of how much data is in Oracle technology today. It's a reasonable amount, right? That is still in typically Oracle database or in Oracle applications or both, right? If you look at the counts, they're absolutely true. Over 400,000 Oracle database customers, typically large enterprises, Global 2000, and tens of thousands still of Oracle application customers on-prem. Okay, so a lot of the strategy has to do with helping these customers transition into the cloud, and in particular, the focus on the data. Okay, so when we built this cloud, so this started 4 years ago before I joined, and literally it was a handful of people. And they were all from Amazon, actually. So it's a pretty amazing story. Anyone who's ever done sort of these entrepreneurial types of efforts at large companies, on one hand, if you're successful, it can be pretty amazing because you have essentially a very consistent investment, consistent capital, but it can also be very challenging, right? But they went through this journey of building what was first a few services and then an entire set of core infrastructure services. We launched it in 2016, and now this will be our 2nd year in the market as a set of infrastructure services. So a lot of the thinking behind it was, again, these are people that built a lot of the services or architected a number of the services in some of the other cloud providers, right? Data warehousing, some of their storage systems, certainly their core networking. So they had seen the scale over a 6 to 8 year period at these other cloud providers. And what they realized were there were some gaps, right, in terms of, or a different focus, whereas some providers are very focused on getting a single developer on the system, right, making them successful, having them scale over time. We felt like there was no one focused on getting an enterprise into the cloud, satisfying very specific requirements around performance, around availability, around SLAs, around these aspects, and that's our focus, right? And we'll get into more details about why that's important to our customers and why it's differentiated and why we think we can make a business out of it. Obviously, the question we get all the time is why? Why do we need another cloud? How do you think you're going to be successful in this market? All those kinds of things. These are some of the prime reasons. We felt like there were gaps. So the focus for us has been, how do we make a cloud where we're going to be able to give customers consistent and high performance, right? And again, if you think about older applications, there's a very stringent requirement when it comes to relational database types of applications running in an environment, whether it's on-prem or anywhere else, right? So that was a guiding principle. How do we look at cloud costs and economics in a way where we can actually unlock a lot of savings and break some of the stereotypes that exist in the cloud, right? Again, I think people I don't know if you've heard anything about price wars or price decreases, because I haven't lately, for years now, because the prices aren't really changing anymore, right? They've kind of set a certain standard. We think there's a lot of value that can still be unlocked in the cloud. That's okay. And then finally, the whole idea of being able to move enterprise workloads, because our customers, we know, if they had the option to rewrite everything, maybe they would, right? But the reality is they have hundreds and thousands of applications that still exist in their portfolios that are going to exist for a while, right? So there's a lot of value in being able to get those applications out of their own data centers into the cloud, and then there's other opportunities that are available, right? So again, people ask us, how do you think you're going to be successful? How do you think you're going to compete in this market? Well, we're going to start with data. We're going to start with the difficult applications to move. We're going to start with customers that typically have Oracle database or applications or both. We're going to get those people into the cloud, right? We're going to do it in a lot of different ways. If they want to move it without changing anything, without changing their architecture, without assuming that extra cost and development of replatforming, great, we can do it with almost no changes or no changes. If they want to start to replatform and do that, that's great too, right? But we want to make it as easy as possible for them to get in their databases and their applications into the cloud. And then we think there's a lot of opportunities to get opened up, right? So I think people talk about, including ourselves, right? Talk about all the possibilities that are available now in terms of the kinds of services you can build, the kinds of high scale services you can tie into your applications and leverage out of the cloud. We think you got to combine both those worlds. All right, so that's just some background. So the other thing I think that we're doing strategically is we're not saying we're going to satisfy every requirement, and we're not going after every single customer that's out there, right? Because we know that we have certain things that we need to continue to build and mature before we can be competitive for that individual developer that wants to build something brand new, right? But in the meantime, our focus is we're gonna get those enterprise workloads, we're gonna get those enterprise databases into our cloud, and then there's many very high performance types of applications, both cloud native and more traditional HPC types of applications that also are in the same boat. They've never had a cloud that satisfies their requirements, right? If anyone knows anything about the HPC market, anyone familiar with HPC computing? Or,
yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, so a lot of that is still on-prem, right? Mm-hmm. Because they're building very specialized systems to handle the performance requirements around there. They're also tied to typically on-premises types of applications like schedulers, like simulation types of engines. No one's really catered to that market, right? So by being able to do enterprise applications, certain classes of HPC as well, the new ones as well as the traditional ones, right? And then starting to unlock some of these new applications, we think that's our path into the market. Okay, so one of the things we're going to do is we're going to show you some of these services in action. So I won't spend a huge amount of time, but last time around, I think there was some confusion in terms of what services Oracle Cloud Infrastructure offers. So I will talk about them at a high level. But then as much as possible, we want to show you the services. Okay, so obviously we have core services like compute, storage, and networking. Okay, so on the compute side, one of the things we did a little differently is not only do we offer many different types of virtual machine instances, but we also offer multiple types of bare metal instances. Okay, so these are very big machines that fit into these either move without re-architecture types of use cases or some of these HPC scenarios. So right now, at least, our biggest machine is 52 cores. You can use block storage or local storage. The local storage can be 51 terabytes of NVMe storage, right? So millions of IOPS, really a ridiculous machine. I have one, and I actually have nothing to run on it, right? Nothing that would even stress it even slightly, personally.
Speaking about bare metal, right? What's the percentage or what's the ratio between x86 and Spark in what you guys have?
Well, for us, it's 100% x86.
So no Sparks?
Yeah. We provide Spark as a managed service.
Okay.
Not as a self-service, pay-as-you-go kind of model.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And again, I'll talk through some of these specific use cases, but again, there's actually, a fair amount of use cases that where bare metal is great. That's exactly what these customers are looking for.
What about the storage then? Is it like 100% Oracle, ZFS, or is it stuff?
Well, let's talk about storage. So we've got a whole range of offerings. So again, we have various what we call dense offerings, where there's local storage inside of the compute instance. We have a block storage service. It is not based on ZFS. It's actually something that we developed organically new.
Okay.
We have a file storage service, which again is something we organically developed new. And the people that built it know a lot about file storage in the cloud because they built it somewhere else before. And then object and archive storage, again, completely new. The architecture and a lot of that software team came from another cloud provider that knows a lot about storage,
okay.
Dropbox. So again, we tried to build, building new all the time doesn't always make sense, but where we felt like there was an opportunity to do something really different and really better, yes, we absolutely built it new.
Right? Okay, so no ZFS appliances.
We're not using ZFS, yeah.
Okay,
yep.
Interesting.
So on the database side, we primarily are focused on Oracle database right now. We do have some offerings that support a Cassandra-like database in the cloud, a MySQL offering, and things like that. But a lot of the focus is around Oracle database right now. We absolutely recognize that people will have other databases that they want to run as a service. But currently, a lot of the focus, at least on relational databases, is with Oracle database, and many, many flavors of that, right? From a single VM all the way up to a full rack Exadata delivered as a service for those that need, over 400 terabytes of protected storage and, millions and millions of IOPS or transactions per second in a database. On the container side, we'll actually have a good demo on that. We've actually implemented a Kubernetes engine that's fully certified with Kubernetes or with the CNCF. It uses Docker native containers, and again, that sort of approach, and Abhi will talk about a little bit more about that later, is to try to embrace open source standards or industry standards as much as possible. So it makes it easier for customers to get in and out of our cloud, right? If they build something that follows a standard, we will look hard at it and try to be compliant, so it's easy, right? Our goal is not to rebuild orchestration like some other clouds, or rebuild an implementation of Kubernetes that has our specific proprietary APIs. It's actually to enable movement in and out of our cloud. Another example of that is we've embraced Terraform as our orchestration technology, as opposed to, again, building our own in that case. And that, again, offers a lot of portability. So if you write your templates once, you can potentially use multiple clouds or things on premises, right? Same thing with Ansible. We've brought in, or we support Ansible that way as well. On the networking side, and Adil will talk about that a little bit more in depth. Again, all organically developed. That's probably where we've invested the most time and most development resources to get a truly software-defined networking environment, so that you could basically do anything you could on-prem and more, right? To match what you may have on-prem in terms of your network segmentation and all the security that you want to apply to your networks. And then, again, making it as flexible as possible as a service, so you have that type of scaling and that type of programmability in the infrastructure. On the security side, I think that's an area where we've made a lot of investments. There's going to be a lot of announcements about that over the coming year to specifically address the many, many enterprise security requirements that are out there. On the edge side, we made an acquisition of a company called Dyn over a year ago, and taking some of their core DNS technology, some of their traffic management, all that kind of stuff, and integrating it into our platform. That's an example where we did not develop organically. We acquired to get some technologies there. One of the benefits of that is now we're able to use their already established physical presence around the world. Their years and years of understanding of how to run a DNS service properly, right? All the experience they've had with good and bad of DDoS types of attacks. Some of that stuff you can't build, right? You're only going to get that through experience. On the bottom layer, I put a bunch of different things. So the ability to basically be able to migrate or run hypervisor environments in the cloud with Ravello. The ability to run cloud-like services on the customer prem that are managed by Oracle. We call it Cloud a Customer. The focus there is to offer database types of services or big data services where, again, we put the hardware on the customer prem or in their colo, and Oracle manages it for them. And then they purchase it as a subscription model. Obvious things like I mentioned migration. You typically need multiple different types of technology to help a customer migrate. Some of it may be file-based data, right? So a storage gateway, we have that as a no-cost type of service to help move data either for databases or file servers. We have a data transfer option for either an appliance or hard drives and things like that to move data into our cloud. And we already have tons and tons of code and services around helping people move either specific applications or data into the cloud. And then the last thing, Adil will talk about it a bit more as well, is the way we think about resource management and resource governance. Again, we've thought about it from big to small, right? So we understand that the bigger the organization, the more complex their logical structure may be when it comes to different business units, different groups that manage resources. We wanted to make that really easy, as opposed to focusing on an individual user per se. Right? Okay, so I'm going to walk through a little bit about what we built, the architecture behind it, and give you some kind of data points to help you understand some of the choices we made. So one of the advantages of building something new is that there's amazing technology that wasn't available 10 years ago, right? And if you built your cloud 10 years ago and you have a certain amount of customer base, as with any product, it becomes very difficult to re-architect that cloud or incorporate those new technologies into your stack, right? So some of the core concepts we've had all along are we want to build an infrastructure that is is easy to use when you want to build in high availability in DR, of course. That's a requirement for pretty much anybody, but certainly enterprises. We made a very specific choice in our network to not oversubscribe, right? So I always compare this to, you're either Southwest or you're NetJets, right? If you're going to over provision and oversubscribe, there are going to be some people that lose, particularly when there's a lot of load on the system, right? So this idea of getting noisy neighbors out of the system was a core tenet. And you could say it's more expensive for us to build a cloud this way, but that's a core tenet where we want to provide a certain amount of assurance when it comes to network performance. The idea of really putting everything into the network versus putting things through hypervisors. So if you look at other clouds, a lot of the controls, a lot of the provisioning, a lot of the data passes through a hypervisor layer, right? If you start to dig into those architectures. And we've spent a lot of time, again, a lot of IP and development to put everything into the network. And that's one example of what we're able to do as a result is that's how we're able to provision entire bare metal instances to customers where we have no provider software on the box. And then very, very fast storage, right? So we do use some magnetic when it comes to slower tiers of storage or different tiers of storage like object storage. But everything else uses NVMe SSD, including our local block and file offerings. Okay, so we're currently in 4 regions. So Phoenix, Ashburn, London, and Frankfurt. We have an aggressive plan to build out over all around the world, including the rest of North America, Asia, and filling out other areas of the world. So very aggressive rollout plan when it comes to regions. All the regions are connected using an Oracle managed backbone network. Obviously, this provides some assurances and some abilities when it comes to moving data between regions, as well as building disaster recovery or multi-site types of applications. And then when we think about availability within a single region, I'll talk about that next. We have multiple concepts to support high availability. So one of the choices we made, another choice we made is connectivity into those regions, right? So I think certainly there are many use cases where people want to be close to a region, right? They want their customer base or something like that close to a region, and that makes sense. But many, many other customers will use some type of private connectivity into a data center region through a network provider, right? And in particular, we believe enterprises are going to behave that way, and they are behaving that way. Where, for example, if you're going to run an enterprise application into the cloud, and you want to offer some quality of service to your end users, you're probably going to leverage what we call fast connect, or private connectivity, between the cloud data center and your own environment. Okay, so bunch of different providers, and we keep adding more providers to enable customers to either use an exchange network to connect into our cloud or do a direct connection between their data center environment and ours. And just quickly here, so again, this is one of those choices we made where every other provider charges for bandwidth when you're using a direct connection. We don't. We just charge by port hour. So if you're using a ton of bandwidth across that line, the cost can become astronomical, right? And you'll see, I'll point out these examples throughout. People sort of just assume that, well, they have to charge because they have to make money, or that's an acceptable price. We think that's not an acceptable price. If you're going to use, again, we think our customers are going to use these private connections, and we want to make it a small part of their bill instead of the entire bill.
Go back to that
Yep.
slide with the connectivity. Nope, the NASCAR slide that's next. That one.
Yep.
Do I see Equinix on there?
Yes.
Oh, there it is. Yeah, thank you. Okay.
Yeah.
That's all I wanted to see. Thanks.
So it's actually amazing how many providers there are, right? There are well over 100 that we will have to integrate over time, but we've hit some of the big ones. Okay, so then within a cloud region, there are multiple ways to provide high availability. whether you're going to try to do or you're going to deploy a multi-availability domain type of architecture, which some of the scale-out applications prefer to do a deployment across 3 logically separated environments, or if you have a more traditional application where you're really inside of one availability domain and you're doing things like anti-affinity of your compute instances. We can support either of those models. Or if you are really more of a active-passive type of DR scenario, that's fine too, right? So if you look across the gamut of ways that people do availability, we support the major ones. I talked a little bit about this. So again, we've made choices in terms of how we built the network and how it actually operates. Some of the other choices we made were providing very, very high bandwidth in the system. And we'll be talking about something where there's an even higher bandwidth option that's available, that will be available for customers. And then very, very low latency, right? Very, very low latency inside of an availability domain, as well as across availability domains. So people see these numbers and they say that's not even possible. But I encourage you to actually give it a try. We do have a free trial, and you can see for yourself the performance within these environments. And again, this is all about trying to get basically non-blocked, super fast performance between nodes, right? Between a compute node and storage, between compute and database, and all these kinds of things. And that's equally applicable whether you're talking about a scale-up type of application or a scale-out type of application. They all need very, very low latency connection between each other. And I'll talk about this more later, but we're so confident in it that we actually have an SLA around network performance, right? That we will provide credits if it's below a certain threshold of network performance. Nobody else does that. Nobody else offers a storage SLA, performance SLA. We do that as well.
And there's no oversubscription on storage either?
Is there oversubscription on storage?
Depends on the definition of oversubscription.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, assuming it's all thin provisioned. So I don't think we do the storage array kind of thin provisioning that you might be thinking about. But in general, yes, our goal is to have no contention between customers and tenants of the system. So this is a little bit theoretical, I admit it. But when you think about block storage costs, okay, so another interesting thing in the market is everybody else charges if you want some type of performance range with your block storage. They're not guaranteeing performance, but they'll say that, well, this is designed to provide you with a higher range of performance. We don't do that. We have one price. We give you a guarantee around performance range, right? So we target 50 IOPS per gigabyte up to a max threshold of over 20,000 IOPS per volume. And that's our SLA, right? So very simple. One price, guaranteed. If we don't meet that target, you get service credits.
So expressed in IOPS per gigabyte, is there a latency?
Is there a latency target?
Yeah.
Good question. I'll have to look in terms of whether that's part of the SLA.
Right.
But certainly in all of our testing, we try to maintain a very flat latency curve.
If it's all NVMe, that should solve that problem.
Yeah, yeah. In fact, I'll show you some other results. We've tested, we've done some work with a publication called Storage Review. So they have a whole suite of benchmarks. It's out there if you want to take a look. And they did test latency performance as well. Ooh, 5 minutes. Okay. So I'll move a little quicker. I talked about this already, the idea of being able to give people entire instances or entire database servers. The coverage of not just availability. So this is probably a topic unto itself. It's kind of interesting if you think about it, right? Because I've been on the other side as a customer. They will never admit that there's a performance issue, right?
you can still reach the application, but what happens if it's only performing at 1%? There's no SLA for that anywhere else, right? They will say, hey, it was available, you could ping it, someone can access it. But if it's a site that needs to actually render something, you're out of luck, right? Just because you can ping it doesn't mean you can use it. So that's what the goal of this is. We're going to guarantee and provide SLAs not just around reaching the target and the application, but the fact that the application will actually work. I talked a bit about this already. So just a few notes in terms of, again, some misperceptions or perceptions that people have. So one of the reasons why we offered bare metal machines is that depending on the workload, there could be a big difference between a virtual machine and a bare metal machine, right? So these are, in particular, HPC types of benchmarks, and it can be as much as 18%. I'm not going to give away obvious thing, but in other use cases, it can be even more. This is another benchmark that we ran. This is bare metal to block storage and a competitive bare metal offering. There's only one that's out there to their block storage, and tremendous difference in performance and ridiculous comparison when it comes to price. Ours is dozens or hundreds of dollars a month. Theirs is thousands of dollars a month. Okay, so I know this is an eye chart, but the big thing around this is, again, if you look at all these different aspects, I've already highlighted some of the big ones. People typically pay way too much for block storage. People pay typically way too much for network egress, which means if you want to get data out of the cloud, right, that's where they get you. When you're actually trying to use the cloud. They typically pay way too much for private connectivity into the cloud. And then the other things are smaller. They're not factors of X or exponentials, but there's significant differences still that are possible when it comes to different resources in the cloud.
Just to be clear, if I have data in the Oracle Cloud, you're telling me I don't have a data gravity problem.
Yeah, we make it much cheaper to get your data out of it. Yep.
Does that go back to that flat port cost?
Some of it's by business choice. Some of it is by design. Yep. Yeah, I mean, again, maybe 10 years ago, there was a reason to charge more for your network, right? But a lot of it is just other providers trying to constrain access into the cloud, right? Or adding certain business factors into the cloud to make it easy to get in, but very difficult to get out, right? And I'm going to skip this part. Okay, so let's do a super fast use case coverage. Okay, and again, Adil will talk about this more in depth. So I just wanted to lay out a few customers that are using us for this more classic move and improve, right? Moving an application out of their own data centers into our cloud. So this is, does anyone have a lawn? I don't. No? Nobody has a lawn anymore?
I do.
Well, these guys do Scott's, fertilizer as well as lawn care services. But they run on JD Edwards, as do many retail and service companies. It's pretty amazing. So they were able to move this into our cloud off of a very old system, frankly. Old database, old version of JDE. We were able to get them into our cloud, and now they're running 3 times faster. So their end user response into the application is 3 times faster because their database is on a brand new hardware. And it's faster than any of the other customers that this system integrator works with, and that's hundreds of customers.
But is this customer running in a sort of managed service at the end of the day? Because you're talking about very old application, very old everything.
Yeah.
So sometimes with this application, you need to do
they were
migration of the application.
They were on managed services. This SI helped them move into our cloud, and now this SI manages this environment for the customer.
Oh, okay.
But it's not a managed hosting environment anymore. I'm going to skip that. Last use case is OceanX. So this is a non-Oracle stack, but with Oracle database. So there's many thousands and thousands of customers and software vendors that have that kind of stack. So we were able to move these guys into our cloud onto Exadata instead of RDS. where they were able to see massive performance improvements with no additional cost, right? So, and this is a marketing automation SaaS company. Okay, with that, we have a bunch of things, capabilities for you to try the product for free, to demo different solutions on it. We call that Jumpstart. But thank you so much for your time.